War has a way of making everyone look for winners before the fighting is even over. The moment conflict begins, people rush to predictions. Analysts go on television with maps and arrows. Commentators speak in absolutes. Politicians declare who is winning, who is losing, who is gaining leverage, who is collapsing. Everyone wants to know which side will emerge stronger when the smoke clears. But history teaches something much darker. In war, the obvious winner is rarely the real winner. Because while nations on the battlefield burn money, burn fuel, burn manpower, burn political capital, and burn public trust, someone else often stands just outside the fire, watching, waiting, profiting, calculating, and when the war ends, that outside player walks away stronger than everyone who fought it. That is the pattern repeated over and over again throughout history. Empires collapse fighting each other while third parties inherit the future. Rivals destroy one another while neutral powers rise in silence. Entire regions spend years rebuilding while someone far away uses the chaos to secure influence, wealth, leverage, and long-term strategic advantage. That is why some of the most important victories in history were won by countries that never fired the deciding shot, and today, as the world watches another major conflict reshape alliances, economies, and military doctrine, one question grows louder behind closed doors. Who actually benefits from all of this? Because beneath the headlines, beneath the battlefield footage, beneath the emotional speeches and strategic analysis, there is a quieter reality taking shape. Someone is positioning themselves for victory regardless of who wins the war itself. Someone is gaining from both outcomes. Someone has built a strategy where every possible ending strengthens them. And that is the most dangerous kind of player in geopolitics, the one who doesn't need to control the battlefield because they control the aftermath. At first glance, this seems impossible. How can one country benefit no matter who wins? How can one state come out ahead regardless of whether one alliance prevails or another collapses? The answer lies in understanding that modern wars are not just military contests, they are economic struggles, political struggles, supply chain struggles, energy struggles, perception struggles, influence struggles, and if you position yourself correctly in all of those arenas, you don't need to win the war directly, you only need to benefit from its consequences. That is exactly what some nations have learned to do. While one side spends billions on ammunition, someone else sells the raw materials. While one alliance imposes sanctions, someone else buys discounted resources. While traditional trade routes collapse, someone else offers alternative infrastructure. While global powers exhaust their militaries, someone else quietly modernizes theirs. Without firing a shot, that is how strategic advantage is built in the modern world, not always through conquest, but through patience, and patience is the rarest commodity in international politics, because democracies think in election cycles, markets think in quarters, media thinks in headlines, but some governments think in decades. They don't ask what happens next week, they ask what happens 10 years from now, 20 years from now. What does this war change in the long arc of history? What systems weaken? What dependencies shift? What alliances fracture? What opportunities appear? And most importantly, how can those opportunities be captured before anyone notices? That is the real game, because war creates disruption and disruption creates openings, openings in trade, openings in diplomacy, openings in military influence, openings in technological leadership, openings in regional power structures, and whoever moves fastest into those openings often gains more than the armies doing the actual fighting. Look at what happens every time a prolonged war erupts. Defense spending explodes, energy markets panic, supply chains reroute, shipping costs surge, commodity prices spike, investment capital flees unstable regions, governments scramble to secure new partnerships, entire industries reorganize themselves around the conflict. Now imagine being the country positioned to capitalize on all of it. Imagine being the nation that can provide alternative fuel while others lose supply, alternative manufacturing while others face shortages, alternative diplomatic partnerships while old alliances weaken, alternative financial systems while sanctions divide the global economy. That country does not need to choose sides in the traditional sense, it simply needs to remain strategically adaptable, and that is where real power begins, because the most powerful position in a conflict is not always being the strongest military, sometimes it is being the indispensable outsider, the player everyone eventually needs, the one who can mediate, supply, finance, rebuild, or stabilize once exhaustion sets in. That is when leverage becomes permanent, because wars eventually end, and when they do, everyone turns toward reconstruction, rearmament, debt recovery, and whoever preserves strength during the conflict suddenly becomes the center of gravity afterward. That is why some strategists believe the greatest geopolitical victories of the 21st century may not belong to the nations fighting hardest, but to the nation patient enough to let others weaken themselves first. Think about the historical examples. The United States emerged enormously strengthened after both world wars, not because its homeland was devastated, but because while others lay in ruins, America's industrial base surged, its financial power expanded, and its strategic influence exploded. The war exhausted everyone else more than it exhausted America, and that imbalance shaped the next century. That is how true geopolitical leaps happen, not merely through victory, but through relative advantage. If your rivals weaken faster than you do, you rise even without dramatic action. That is the quiet logic shaping so much of modern strategy, because nations today understand direct confrontation is costly, too costly. Nuclear deterrence, economic interdependence, and media scrutiny have changed the nature of great power competition. Now the smartest powers often avoid fighting directly and instead let broader systemic shifts do the work, let rivals overextend, let alliances fracture, let inflation rise elsewhere, let debt spiral elsewhere, let political anger grow elsewhere, then step in when everyone else is tired. That is how influence expands without invasion. And the public rarely notices it happening in real time because it does not look dramatic. It looks gradual, quiet, administrative, trade deals signed here, infrastructure financed there, ports developed, pipelines negotiated, currencies internationalized, technology standards exported, supply chains redirected, military doctrine modernized. It doesn't make headlines like missiles do, but over time it changes the balance of the world. That is why, while many people watch war and ask who is winning militarily, strategists often ask a very different question: who is gaining structurally? Who is becoming more central to the future system being built out of this chaos? Because the battlefield result may matter less than the structural outcome. One side may win territory and still lose economically. One alliance may win tactically and still fracture politically. One government may survive and still emerge strategically weaker. Meanwhile, someone else far from the battlefield gains everything: influence, prestige, access, dependence, credibility. That is what long-term power actually looks like, and it is often invisible until the shift is already complete. The world suddenly wakes up one day and realizes a nation once seen as secondary is now central. Its trade routes are indispensable, its markets are unavoidable, its diplomacy is necessary, its influence touches every major negotiation, and by then it is too late to reverse easily. That transformation is not accidental, it is engineered, built patiently over years while louder powers distract themselves in visible conflict. Because great strategy often means resisting the temptation to dominate immediately. It means allowing history to create opportunities and being prepared when they arrive. That is why the country best positioned to win from war is often not the loudest, not the most aggressive, not the one making threats, but the one watching quietly, calculating every shift, the one that understands history's oldest lesson: when rivals destroy each other, the patient inherit the future. That doesn't mean war itself is good for anyone. It isn't. The human cost is devastating: lives shattered, families destroyed, cities ruined, generations traumatized. But geopolitically, conflict rearranges power whether we like it or not, and every rearrangement creates beneficiaries. Someone always benefits. Someone always emerges stronger than before, even if no one notices at first. The challenge is identifying them before the rest of the world does, before their temporary advantage becomes permanent, before their quiet positioning transforms into undeniable leadership. And that is what may be happening now. As major powers pour resources into confrontation, as alliances test their limits, as economies absorb the shock, as populations grow tired and divided, a quieter power may be doing exactly what history rewards most: remaining patient, remaining strategic, remaining just far enough from the fire to avoid being burned, but close enough to feel the heat and profit from it. If that is true, then the real winner of this war will not be determined by the final battle, not by who captures what territory, not by which flag flies over disputed ground, not by whose military claims victory. The real winner will be the nation that emerges with more leverage, more influence, more economic reach, and more strategic flexibility than before the war began, because that is what power is in the modern age: not just military dominance, but systemic advantage. And if one country has positioned itself so that every possible ending strengthens it, then that country has already won the most important battle, the battle before the war even ends, because the greatest victory in geopolitics is not defeating your enemy directly. It is building a world where your enemies weaken themselves while you grow stronger watching it happen. That is the kind of strategy history remembers. The kind that transforms nations into superpowers, the kind that changes the global order. And when future historians look back at this era, they may not remember only who fought hardest. They may remember who benefited most, who stayed calm while others panicked, who planned long while others reacted short, who understood that wars are not just won on battlefields, but in the systems built afterward. Because in the end, the only country that truly wins, no matter how this war ends, is the one prepared for every ending before the first shot was fired. And if such a country exists today, then the world may not yet understand how much the future already belongs to it.